Want to change your life? Then start by changing your input. You're not stuck. You're underinformed. You don't lack intelligence. You lack intentional learning. Every single day, you're either growing or you're decaying. There's no neutral zone. If you're serious about building a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside, then you have to commit to reading, learning, and growing. Not someday, not when you're less busy, but now. Your brain is not just some fixed organ that operates at the same capacity every day. It's more like a muscle, flexible, adaptable, and full of potential. But like any muscle, if you don't train it, it weakens. If you neglect it, it slows down. If you let it sit idle, it starts operating on autopilot, stuck in old habits, trapped in outdated thinking, and resistant to change. This is why reading, learning, and stretching your mind every single day is not optional, it's necessary. You can't expect to improve your life without improving the quality of your thoughts, and you can't upgrade your thinking if you're not actively doing something that forces your mind to grow. The truth is, every single day, you're either training your brain to expand or letting it shrink. You're either challenging your thinking or reinforcing your comfort zone. And if you're not doing something intentional to build mental strength, like reading, analyzing, questioning, or reflecting, then by default, you're letting your mind drift. That drift leads to passivity, and passivity leads to stagnation. You can't become stronger by doing what's easy, and you definitely can't become mentally tougher by doing nothing. Reading is your workout for the mind. Every paragraph, every idea, every sentence you digest adds weight to your intellectual bench press. It gives you something to push against, to lift, to carry. That's how strength is built. Not just strength in facts or data, but strength in perspective. When you read, you start to see patterns. You learn to connect ideas. You sharpen your judgment. You strengthen your focus. In a world full of distractions, that alone gives you an edge. And think about this. Your brain craves novelty. It thrives on new input. That's what sparks creativity. That's what fuels motivation. When you read every day, even if it's just for 10 minutes, you're feeding your mind something fresh, something it can chew on, something that challenges it to think differently. And when your brain is challenged, it grows. That growth compounds. The more you read, the more you learn, the more you learn, the more you start seeing solutions you never saw before. Problems begin to look smaller. Your options look bigger. You start walking into rooms with more confidence because you've equipped yourself with insight and awareness. And don't confuse this with academic learning. This isn't about textbooks or school assignments. This is about building the kind of knowledge that helps you become a better thinker, a better communicator, a better decision maker. Reading the right material can teach you how to control your emotions. It can show you how to lead. It can teach you the principles of success, discipline, resilience, negotiation, mindset, habits, things that school doesn't always teach you, but life definitely demands of you. And here's the kicker. You don't even need to read for hours a day to change your life. It's the consistency that matters more than the volume. 10 pages a day, one chapter, one article that stretches your perspective. That's it. Over time, those daily pages compound into a library of knowledge sitting inside your head. And the value of that is priceless. It's not just about being smart, it's about being prepared. Life will test you professionally, emotionally, financially, and the more mentally trained you are, the more likely you are to respond, not react, to think through, not panic, to adapt, not crumble. Let's also talk about the emotional side. When your brain is engaged in learning, it lifts your mood. Why? Because progress makes us feel alive. And learning is progress. Every time you read and understand something new, there's a part of your brain that lights up and says, I'm evolving. That creates momentum. You start to crave more. You build an identity around being a learner, a thinker, a doer. And when you build that identity, everything around you starts to shift. You attract different conversations. You notice different opportunities. You become someone others look to for insight. But none of that happens unless you make the decision to train your brain. It won't do it on its own. Just like you wouldn't expect your body to stay fit without effort, you can't expect your mind to stay sharp without work. So make reading a non-negotiable. Make learning your daily discipline, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're serious about your own evolution. Because your future depends on how strong your mind becomes today. In a world where most people consume to escape, you consume to grow. In a world full of mental junk food, you feed your brain clean fuel. That alone sets you apart. That alone makes you dangerous in the best possible way. And it all starts with the simplest habit of all, picking up a book and letting your brain do the work it was designed to do, grow, every single day. Learning is not just about accumulating knowledge. It's not about stuffing your brain with facts or checking off the number of books you've read. Real learning goes deeper than that. It's about transformation. It's about taking what you've learned, applying it, and watching how it shifts the way you think, behave, and respond to life. You can read 100 books, watch 1,000 TED Talks, and listen to endless podcasts. But if none of that changes how you live, then it's just noise. Information becomes powerful only when you use it. Every time you learn something new, your brain is presented with a choice. Store it and forget it, or apply it and grow from it. And most people, they store it. They walk around with potential power locked in their minds, but never let it translate into real-world results. They know what to do, but they don't do it. They've read all about productivity, but still procrastinate. They've studied emotional intelligence, but still snap when they're stressed. Why? Because they haven't moved from learning to doing. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people stay stuck, and that's the real reason many never see the change they desire. They consume and consume and consume, but they don't act. They don't test the wisdom. They don't implement the insight. And without implementation, knowledge just becomes clutter. It sits in the back of your mind, useless, collecting dust like an unopened gift that could have changed everything if only you had unwrapped it. This is why intentional learning matters. You don't just learn for the sake of learning. You learn to improve how you think. You learn to become more aware of your patterns. You learn so you can recognize better decisions in the moment. The kind of learning that changes your life is the kind that makes you pause and say, wait, I've been doing it wrong. Let me try it this way. That's the kind of learning that sticks. That's the kind of learning that rewires you. Think about it this way. Information is like a seed. On its own, it has potential. But if you don't water it with action, if you don't plant it in the soil of your daily habits, then nothing will grow. You'll walk around holding seeds in your hand, but no garden in your life. And what's the point of that? The key to real growth is this. When you learn something new, use it immediately. Even if it's messy, even if you get it wrong, even if you're unsure, try it, practice it, adjust as you go. The moment you read something powerful, find one way, just one small way to apply it. That's how learning becomes a tool for transformation, not just entertainment. You also have to understand that learning isn't something you graduate from. It's not limited to school or college or workshops. Learning is a lifelong relationship you have with your own growth. The people who are constantly evolving, the ones who seem to reinvent themselves, stay sharp, adapt quickly, they're not just lucky. They've made learning a habit. They're not learning because they have to. They're learning because they choose to. Because they know that the minute they stop learning, they stop expanding. And this isn't just about academic or career success. This is about personal power. The more you know, the more confident you become, not because you have all the answers, but because you've trained yourself to seek solutions. Learning teaches you how to navigate uncertainty. It gives you frameworks to process emotions, systems to manage your time, stories that remind you you're not alone, and strategies to become more resilient. When you learn every day, you become less reactive and more intentional. You don't just go through life on autopilot. You start noticing your thoughts. You begin choosing your responses. You create space between stimulus and reaction. That space is everything. It's the difference between repeating the same mistakes and choosing a better path. And don't let anyone fool you into thinking that learning has to be boring or academic. It doesn't. You can learn through books. Yes, but also through conversations, through observation, through reflection, through experience. You can learn from people who are nothing like you, and you can learn from people who've walked exactly where you are right now. You can learn by asking better questions, listening more, and assuming less. Learning is everywhere, but only if you're present enough to notice it. You want to change your life. Change what you're learning and how you're applying it. You want to get unstuck. Start turning insights into habits. You want to feel more confident, more focused, more grounded? Then stop consuming knowledge like junk food. Start using it like fuel. That's how you build momentum. That's how you grow. So the next time you learn something, anything, pause. Ask yourself, how can I use this? Where in my life does this apply? What small shift can I make today that aligns with this lesson? That simple practice alone will separate you from 90% of people who are stuck in a cycle of knowing but never doing. Don't just learn, apply. Don't just read, transform. That's where the real power is. That's where your life begins to shift. One insight, one decision, one action at a time. You don't need to read a book a day. That's where most people get it wrong. They think transformation has to come in huge dramatic bursts, that unless they're sprinting through an entire novel in one sitting or spending hours studying, it doesn't count. But the truth is, transformation is quiet. It's slow, it's subtle, and it's built through small, consistent actions repeated daily, like reading just 10 pages a day. That might not seem like much. In fact, it might feel almost too easy, like it won't make any real difference. But over time, those small inputs create massive outcomes. That simple act done every single day adds up to thousands of pages a year. You'd be reading an entire library's worth of wisdom just by committing to a habit that takes less than 20 minutes. The compound effect is real. Just like saving money, going to the gym, or drinking water, reading works on the principle of compounding. 10 pages doesn't just give you 10 pages worth of knowledge. It gives you a pattern of self-respect. It teaches your brain discipline. It tells your mind that what you feed it matters. And once you begin building that streak, you start to shift something deeper than your thoughts. You begin to shift your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who should read more and start seeing yourself as a reader, as someone who grows a little every single day, as someone who invests in their future mind like it's the most important asset they own. Because it is. You don't need to overwhelm yourself. You don't need a complex system. You just need a moment of intention, a decision that today you'll show up for your mind, that while everyone else is numbing out, checking out, zoning out, you'll be checking in. Because reading isn't just about information. It's about direction. Every paragraph you read shifts your focus, strengthens your insight, and changes how you see the world. That's why the pages you turn matter. They're not just filled with facts or fiction, they're filled with mirrors, maps, and mentors. Most people spend their time consuming content that shrinks them, scrolling, watching, passively absorbing opinions that keep them stuck in the same loops. But when you commit to reading, even in small doses, you step out of that fog, you begin to rise above the noise. You start choosing what enters your mind instead of leaving it to randomness. That kind of control is rare and it's powerful. Let's be real. Life will never stop being busy. There will always be deadlines, distractions, responsibilities. But in the midst of that chaos, you can carve out one habit that's yours. 10 pages in the morning with your coffee. 10 pages before bed. 10 pages during your commute or lunch break. That time adds up, and what it creates is not just knowledge, it creates momentum. You start reading about leadership, and suddenly you're leading yourself better. You read about discipline, and you show up to your workouts with more fire. You read about emotional intelligence, and your relationships start to shift. You don't need to read an entire personal development library to feel the impact. You just need to read something that makes you think a little differently, act a little smarter, choose a little wiser. That's how growth works. It sneaks up on you, but only if you show up first. And it's not just about the content, it's about the commitment. The fact that you show up for yourself when it would be easier not to. That you make the decision to learn even when no one's watching. 10 pages a day may not look like a revolution, but give it a year and you'll be unrecognizable. You'll think differently, speak differently, decide differently, because you've given your mind new tools, new ideas, and new language to build a new life. So don't underestimate the power of small, smart habits. Don't dismiss the pages because they're few. Consistency beats intensity. You don't need a sprint. You need a walk that you refuse to skip. A commitment you honor, not because it's dramatic, but because it works. Because it adds up. And because deep down, you know that those 10 pages aren't just paper and ink. They're the blueprint of who you are becoming. Reading keeps your ego in check. That might sound strange, but it's the truth. The more you read, the more you realize how much you don't know, and that is the beginning of real wisdom. Most people walk around believing they've got life figured out, but they're stuck in echo chambers, repeating the same thoughts and patterns they've always known. They surround themselves with people who think like them, act like them, and live like them. And you know what? That kind of comfort zone is a breeding ground for arrogance. But when you really read books that challenge you, authors who see the world differently than you do, you open up your mind to a universe you hadn't considered. Suddenly, your opinions don't feel so solid. Your certainties don't seem so certain. And that's a good thing. Because being open-minded doesn't mean you abandon your values. It means you develop the emotional maturity to hear a different perspective without feeling threatened. It means you welcome the discomfort that comes with confronting new information. That kind of humility is rare and it's powerful. Reading teaches you to shut up and listen, to learn before you assume, to pause before you judge. That one shift alone, shifting from I already know to what else can I learn, can transform your relationships, your mindset, and your life. Every time you pick up a book, you are inviting another mind into your space. You are giving someone else's experiences, pain, wisdom, and insight a chance to meet your own. That's not just educational, it's deeply human. Think about it. There are people who have lived through wars, heartbreaks, revolutions, and transformations. They've survived unimaginable things, and instead of taking that wisdom to the grave, they poured it into books. They did the hard work of distilling decades of experience into pages you can absorb in hours. That's not something to take lightly. Now here's where the ego check really kicks in. When you start reading books by great thinkers, leaders, philosophers, and survivors, you begin to realize how small your world has been. That's not an insult, it's a wake-up call. Most people only operate from their limited perspective. They don't question their patterns. They don't challenge their worldview. They don't even realize they're living in a mental box. Reading is what breaks that box open. You start seeing how flawed some of your thinking has been. You start admitting to yourself that maybe, just maybe, you've been wrong about a few things, that maybe your way isn't the only way, that maybe there's more to life than the story you've been telling yourself. And that moment when you start to question your own beliefs, not from a place of insecurity, but from a place of genuine curiosity, that's when growth really begins. That's when you become teachable. That's when you become unstoppable. Because a person who is humble enough to keep learning will never stop evolving. Reading gives you access to ideas you didn't know existed. It introduces you to people you'll never meet in person, but who can still mentor you through their words. It gives you the tools to make better decisions, not because someone told you what to think, but because you've taken the time to think for yourself. That is intellectual power. That is emotional intelligence. And that is what separates the average from the extraordinary. Don't underestimate how much reading can do for your mindset. It helps you manage your emotions better because you start to understand where those emotions come from. You start to connect the dots between your past, your patterns, and your potential. That self-awareness? That's the key to growth. But it only comes when you're willing to sit with new ideas, challenge your biases, and allow yourself to evolve. Look, we live in a world that praises confidence, but confidence without curiosity becomes arrogance. You don't grow by being the smartest person in the room. You grow by being the one who is always willing to learn more, ask more, read more. Reading keeps you grounded. It reminds you that no matter how much you've accomplished, there's still more to understand, more to explore, more to become. The moment you stop learning is the moment you start shrinking. Reading is how you push back against that. It's how you stay open, aware, and aligned with a life that's always expanding. You're not meant to stay stuck in one level of thinking your whole life. You're meant to keep rising. And reading daily consistently, with intention, is the vehicle that takes you there. So read to grow, but also read to remember that you're not done yet. There's always more to know, more to feel, more to give. Keep your ego in check. Keep your mind open. Keep turning the page. Real growth doesn't happen when everything feels easy, comfortable, or familiar. It happens in the moments when you're forced to stretch, to question, to adapt. Growth begins where your comfort zone ends, and that's exactly what reading does. When you challenge yourself with new ideas, foreign perspectives, and topics you don't yet understand, it pulls you out of the repetitive thought loops you've been circling in for years and introduces you to something unfamiliar, something that might shake the foundation of your beliefs. That's not just reading, that's transformation in motion. Most people avoid this kind of mental discomfort. They only read what they agree with. They gravitate to stories or articles that reinforce their current opinions. That's not growth, that's confirmation. And it's dangerous because it makes you think you're learning, but really you're just building stronger walls around what you already believe. The truth is, if you're never uncomfortable while reading, you're probably not growing. You're staying in the same mental neighborhood, hanging out with the same thoughts, afraid to explore the unknown corners of your own potential. When you read something that makes you uncomfortable, your brain doesn't immediately accept it. It pushes back. You might get defensive. You might even get angry. And that's okay. That resistance you feel, that's the exact sign that you're on the edge of breakthrough. Because growth is messy. It's not linear. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like confusion, like doubt, like frustration. But those feelings are signals. They're proof that you're challenging old wiring in your brain. You're untangling patterns that no longer serve you. Think about it. Some of the most powerful moments of clarity you've had in life didn't come from things that were easy to hear. They came from a hard truth, from something that hit you deep, from a lesson that made you rethink everything. That's the kind of growth that sticks. That's the kind of transformation that doesn't fade after a day or a week. And books, when you choose the right ones, can give you that level of insight over and over again. This is why you can't just read what feels good. You've got to seek out books that scare you a little, books that tackle topics you don't understand, books that come from people who think differently than you. Because when you open yourself up to ideas that contradict your worldview, you build mental flexibility, and that flexibility becomes emotional resilience. The more you stretch your mind, the more adaptable, creative, and resourceful you become in the rest of your life. And here's something most people don't realize. Growth through discomfort doesn't just expand your knowledge, it expands your identity. It changes the way you see yourself. It gives you permission to evolve, to let go of old labels, to move past who you used to be. You are not a fixed personality. You are not defined by your past habits or limited by your past education. Every book you read that challenges you is an invitation to rewrite your story, to update the narrative you've been living by. So if you really want to grow, stop reaching for the same kinds of content over and over. Stop telling yourself that you already know enough. If you're not actively seeking out what makes you uncomfortable, you're not really seeking growth. Start reading outside your comfort zone. Read about psychology if you're not emotional. Read about money if you've always struggled financially. Read biographies of people you disagree with. Read history that makes you question what you were taught. Every time you feel resistance to an idea, that's your cue to lean in, not pull away. The people who grow the fastest in life are the ones who are brave enough to be wrong, brave enough to admit they don't know everything, brave enough to be uncomfortable while they learn. That's what reading is supposed to do. It's supposed to challenge your assumptions, provoke your thoughts, and demand your attention. And the more often you lean into that discomfort, the more naturally you'll start doing it in the rest of your life, at work, in relationships, in your goals. Growth is not about feeling good in the moment. It's about becoming better in the long run. So don't just read for entertainment. Read to evolve. Seek out the books that feel like work. The ones you have to reread. The ones that make you put the book down and reflect. The ones that make you pause and say, wow, I never thought of it that way. That's how you know you're not just reading, you're transforming. So if you want to grow, really grow, lean into the books that make you uncomfortable. Don't avoid the mental discomfort. Chase it. Because on the other side of that resistance is a version of you that's stronger, wiser, and more powerful than you've ever been before. Each chapter, each insight brings you closer to that version of yourself you've always envisioned. More confident, more informed, and more empowered. But here's the truth most people don't want to accept. Becoming that version of yourself is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen by accident, And it's not going to happen while you're waiting for the right timing, the perfect motivation, or for someone to come along and hand it to you. You build it brick by brick, thought by thought, one small intentional choice at a time. And it starts with what you're feeding your mind. Every time you pick up a book, you're making a declaration. You're telling the world, and more importantly, you're telling yourself that you are not content with staying where you are. You're saying, I want more. I'm willing to do the work, and I believe in who I can become. That's powerful. That kind of mindset separates you from the masses. Most people are living the same year over and over, calling it a life. They consume the same entertainment, hang around the same people, react to the same triggers, and then wonder why nothing ever changes. The answer isn't in doing more, it's in thinking better. And thinking better only happens when you commit to learning, expanding, and growing through intentional input. Reading introduces you to new frameworks, new beliefs, and new stories that contradict the limitations you've carried around for years. Maybe you believed you weren't smart enough or capable enough, or that people like you don't succeed. Then you read a story of someone who came from less, who faced more, and still created a powerful, purpose-driven life. And suddenly that belief starts to crack. You begin to question the lies you've accepted. That's growth. That's the real beginning of transformation. Not flashy, not loud, but slow, quiet rewiring from the inside out. Books challenge your default settings. They ask you to reflect, to reconsider, to stretch. And when you finish a book, you're not the same person who opened it. You've taken in a new way of seeing the world. And those subtle shifts matter. They show up in how you speak to yourself when you fail. They show up in how you treat others when you're frustrated. They show up in how you handle setbacks, risks, and opportunities. Personal growth doesn't always announce itself with big wins. It whispers through better decisions, stronger boundaries, deeper self-awareness, and bolder steps forward. But none of that is possible without a daily decision. You don't stumble into a better life. You read your way into it. You listen your way into it. You learn your way into it. And that learning compounds, just like money. The more you invest in your knowledge, the more it pays off. A good book today might not change your life tomorrow, but it might plant the idea that will shift everything for you a year from now. Or it might give you the confidence to speak up in a meeting, or the clarity to walk away from something that's draining your energy. You never know which sentence, which page, which story will be the one that moves the needle. But if you don't open the book, you'll never find out. And this isn't about academic knowledge. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about becoming youthfully, deeply, and intentionally. It's about closing the gap between who you are and who you know you're capable of being. That version of you, the one who shows up with conviction, who handles adversity with calm, who speaks with clarity, who moves with purpose, that version is waiting on the other side of your commitment to growth. So yes, every chapter matters. Every insight adds another tool to your mental toolbox. Every lesson shapes the way you navigate your future. This is the work. And you don't have to do it all at once, just one page, one idea, one shift at a time. That's how transformation happens, quietly, consistently, every single day. That's how you build the kind of life that doesn't just look good, but feels good, because it's rooted in who you've become. You can't outperform the level of your thinking. That sentence alone holds the weight of transformation. Every single result you get in life, whether it's your income, your relationships, your self-confidence, your habits, it's all tied to one thing, the quality of your thoughts. If your thinking is stuck, your life is stuck. If your thinking is chaotic, your decisions will be all over the place. If your thinking is limited, then everything you create will be built within those limitations. This is where reading, learning, and growing come in, because the real benefit of consuming new ideas isn't just gathering facts, it's rewiring the way you think. You're not just absorbing someone else's words, you're breaking out of the mental cage that's kept you small, insecure, or doubtful. That's why one quote can stop you like a punch in the gut. That's why one quote can stop you in your tracks and flip your perspective. Your mindset is the operating system of your life. And just like a phone or a laptop, if you don't update that system, it slows down, it crashes, it can't handle what's coming next. So if your life feels stuck, look at your thinking. If you feel like you're running in circles, repeating the same cycles, making the same mistakes, then that's a clear signal. It's time to upgrade your mind. And that doesn't mean cramming motivational content or consuming every self-help book in sight. It means slowing down long enough to sit with new ideas, to understand them, to apply them. Reading and learning challenge your existing thought patterns. They pull you out of autopilot and force you to question, to expand, to evolve. Think about it. Every breakthrough you've had in your life started with a new thought, a shift in perspective. That time you finally realized your worth and walked away from something toxic, it started with a shift in thinking. That moment you decided to stop playing small and go after something bold, it wasn't luck. It was your thinking that made it possible. You started believing something new, and when your beliefs changed, your behavior followed. So ask yourself, how often do you challenge your own thoughts? How often do you sit down to learn something that doesn't just confirm what you already believe? Growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in discomfort. It happens when you expose yourself to thoughts that are bigger than yours, sharper than yours, and sometimes even contradict yours. And you don't have to agree with every idea you come across. But if you never hear anything new, how do you expect to think differently? To live differently? This is why reading is so powerful. It's a workout for your mind. You begin to notice your assumptions. You start catching the lies you tell yourself. You recognize the patterns you've been running on for years, maybe even decades. And that awareness, that's everything. Because once you see a limiting belief, you can replace it. Once you catch a thought that keeps you stuck, you can rewrite it. You become the author of your mind instead of just the reader of your circumstances. The biggest battles you'll ever fight in life aren't external, they're internal. And the only way to win those battles is to sharpen the weapon between your ears. Every page you read, every insight you absorb, every perspective you explore, it's all making you stronger. It's all expanding the ceiling of what's possible for you. Your success, your peace, your progress, they're all waiting on the other side of better thinking. And better thinking doesn't happen by accident. It happens through intention, through repetition, through daily choices to feed your mind with something more empowering than yesterday's thoughts. So don't settle for mental routines that no longer serve you. Don't get so comfortable in your old way of thinking that you forget you're allowed to change. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to unlearn what isn't true and relearn what's useful. Your current level of thinking brought you here. But if you want to go somewhere you've never been, you'll need to think in ways you've never thought. Your mind is your foundation. Strengthen it, stretch it, upgrade it. Read books that make you uncomfortable. Listen to thinkers who challenge your worldview. Learn ideas that scare you, excite you, confuse you, because those are the ones that will set you free. The ones that will wake you up. The ones that will push you out of the box you didn't even know you were living in. Your thinking grows, you grow. And when you grow, everything around you begins to change, not by magic, but by mental alignment. Because the quality of your life will never exceed the quality of your thoughts. So guard your mind, feed it well, invest in it, challenge it, stretch it, and above all, grow it every single day. When you choose to read instead of scroll, when you decide to invest in your personal growth instead of numbing your mind with distractions, you're doing something rare. You're rising. You are stepping into a mental space where most people don't dare to go because growth requires effort. And reading daily, learning daily, reflection, that's the kind of work that sets you apart. It's not flashy. You don't get instant validation from it, but you do get something much more valuable over time: clarity, strength, and direction. Most people are drowning in distractions and starving for wisdom. They live reacting instead of creating. They consume endlessly but apply nothing. But when you sit down to read a book, to take in something educational or transformative, you are quietly rebelling against that way of living. You are saying no to being average. You're saying no to being passive. You're saying no to a life that's ruled by impulse and entertainment. Instead, you're saying yes to intention. Yes to discipline. Yes to building something in your mind that no one can take from you. Growth is not glamorous. It happens in silence. It happens when you read one more page after you're tired. When you listen to one more podcast instead of playing music that just fills the air. When you journal about what you learned instead of forgetting it the moment the content ends. That's what separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need a consistent one. And you don't need motivation to begin. You need structure, a time, a place, a habit. It's incredibly easy to go through life on autopilot, to wake up, go through the motions, and never really engage your full potential. And that's the real cost of not learning. It's not just missed knowledge, it's missed opportunity. Every day you skip your growth. Every day you avoid learning something new. You're not just staying the same, you're slipping further from your future self. That version of you that's bold, confident, skilled, and unstoppable, that person is built through repetition, through small acts of learning stacked day by day until they transform who you are. And don't wait until life forces you to grow. Learn before you need it. That's what smart people do. They stay ahead by investing in themselves when nothing is wrong, so they're ready when things are. Reading expands your perspective. It prepares you for conversations you haven't had yet, decisions you haven't faced yet, problems you don't even see coming. And when those moments arrive, you'll be the one who's calm, grounded, and equipped, not because you're lucky, but because you've been building your mind while others wasted theirs. It's also important to remember that growth doesn't happen in a straight line. Some days you'll feel fired up and inspired. Other days it'll feel like a chore. But it's in those uninspired moments that real growth is born. Because when you show up on the hard days, you're reinforcing who you are. You're telling yourself, this is just what I do. That identity, the identity of a lifelong learner, is what carries you through the storms and into a higher version of your life. You don't need to read for hours, but you do need to read with intention. Pick books that challenge you, not just ones that make you feel good. Follow people who teach, not just those who entertain. Be willing to be a beginner, again and again, because that's where your edge is. You weren't born to know everything. You were born to discover, to explore, to grow. That's the whole point of being human. When you look back on your life a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the question will not be how many likes you got, how many hours you worked, or how many people approved of you. The real question will be, how much did you grow? How much did you stretch? How much did you learn? And how did that learning change your life? That's the measure of success that truly matters. So make reading, learning, and personal growth a non-negotiable part of your day. Let it be your anchor when the world feels chaotic. Let it be your quiet rebellion against mediocrity. Let it be the habit that shapes you into someone who doesn't just survive, but thrives. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to be the one who keeps showing up, one page, one idea, one new thought at a time. That's how you build a life that no one can take from you. That's how you rise.